Who is the person in your church that you find most difficult? That's the question I'd like you to bear in mind as we begin this first session of the Unity course. We're going to be reflecting on the central Christian call to love our neighbour, including within the church, and even when that neighbour is someone with whom we profoundly disagree. In relation to this particular person, what's happened to make you feel that way? Is there a way forward? Indeed, have you thought very much about how your interactions with this person relate to your own life of faith? I'm suggesting that because love is foundational within the story of Christianity, it should also be foundational in our challenging relationships, even as we face our inevitable disagreements. And for me, this is all rooted in a particular moment recorded in John's Gospel, shortly after Jesus washed his disciples' feet at the Last Supper. After Judas had departed to pursue the betrayal of his master, Jesus gave the remaining disciples what he calls the new commandment, to love one another. And then in John 13:35, he says, "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Sometimes I ask people how, in their heart of hearts, they might have hoped that Jesus would finish his own sentence. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if ... Because the answers we might offer can tell their own story about the aspect of Christian life about which we have become most passionate or protective. Often, a particular style of worship becomes so important for the spiritual identity of a particular Christian that they speak, write, and act as if to worship exactly as they do is essential in the Christian life. Sometimes we risk forgetting that even with our dramatically different ways of worshipping across the church, we are nonetheless engaging with the one same God. So everyone will know that you are my disciples if we all worship the same way. No, at this particular moment, Jesus doesn't talk about styles of worship or particular theological theories or financial generosity. He spoke simply and clearly about the mutual love between his followers. By this, they, those outside the community of faith, will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And that, for me, is foundational for Loving Disagreement as a book and for the Unity course. Because Jesus makes a straightforward, direct link that perhaps surprises us when he says that others will be able to identify disciples because of their mutual love. I think that many Christians today generally act as if he had said that disciples would be recognizable through the way they love their neighbour outside the church, at the food bank or the debt advice centre, for example. But here, Jesus says it's the love within the church which is of defining significance. To use the imagery from John chapter 15, we are on the same vine. And yet it is so easy to slide on an apparently inevitable downward spiral where an initial disagreement soon becomes an entrenched conflict. So my invitation to you is first to think about your thinking. As the course progresses, we'll consider in future sessions our praying, then worshipping, then writing and speaking, and finally our call to be those seeking unity and making peace. But first, thinking. The Bible has much to say about what goes on in our interior thought world. In Isaiah 55, the Lord famously declares, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." And that heavenly perspective comes immediately after a recognition that turning to God involves the rejection of unrighteous thoughts. Let the wicked forsake their ways, and the unrighteous their thoughts. Let them turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on them, and to our God, for he will freely pardon. The question for us as disagreeing Christians is whether we have much interest in bringing our interior thought world before God, whether we are open to the unique transformation he can bring. Not everyone seems to recognize the appeal of coming to these precious waters where it's possible to buy wine and milk without money and without cost, as verse 1 of the chapter puts it. But it is in this surrender to God, including the surrendering of destructive thoughts, that the way of mercy and pardon is opened up. There's another wonderful consideration of these themes in Psalm 139, where great comfort is found in God's knowledge of our individual circumstances. The psalmist is clear that this divine insight extends as far as the thoughts we have, even before a word is on our tongue. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. So before we write or speak in a disagreement, what are we thinking? And what are we reflecting on what it might mean to invite God himself to shape that thinking in a way that is more loving, that is more reflective of the kind of person who reveals the mutual love that Jesus says should be at the heart of the church? One question coming up is about how easy you find it to think charitably about people with opposing views in the midst of a disagreement. The saying goes that charity begins at home, but I'm not sure it always begins in our home church. My suggestion is that we're called to a shift in our perspective, where we're reminded that this call to loving charity really does begin at home. This is about seeking a genuine love for others as a gift that comes uniquely from God, something that bubbles up like a well of living water and overflows to those around us. The impact, God willing, is that we become more loving, we become more recognizably Christian, and as a result, we approach our disagreements in a more recognizably Christian way.